Hello, and thank you for coming to my presentation. My name is Caden Moran. I'm a junior at the California University of Pennsylvania, studying political science with a concentration and minor in pre-law. The research that I did for Strike a Spark was from my honors 330 class last semester. It's called Topics in Culture and Society, where we focused mainly on voting, citizenship, and elections. A part of this class, we had to research a suffragette from the suffrage movement in the United States. All we were given was the suffragette's name and where they were from. So we had to figure out all of this information given to you just based off of the name and where they were from. We use this primarily by using primary sources such as the census and tax records and birth documents and death certificates, and some other secondary sources such as newspaper articles. So I will tell you about Flora Williams, the singing suffragette. Flora Williams was born on December 17th, 1863 to Samuel B. and Ruth Ann Williams in Wheeling, West Virginia. On September 18th, 1889, in Belmont, Ohio, she married her husband, Walter Leroy Williams. Yes, ironically, her last name is the same as her husband's, so she changed her name from Miss Flora Williams to Mrs. Flora Williams. Walter, her husband, was a telegraph operator and was born in 1856 to his parents named Lewis and Caroline. After their marriage in 1889, Flora and Walter lived in a house in Washington, Ohio County, West Virginia. As well as teaching music, Williams performed as a soprano and soloist and directed many musical programs in her lifetime. Her career as a soprano soloist and vocal instructor dominated much of her adult life. She was the director of the Wheeling Centennial Chorus, though at the time that she was the director of this is unknown to us. Williams was a member of the Mozart Singing Society, and because of that, had the honor to sing at the opening of Mozart Park in Incline in Wheeling, West Virginia. At this, she sang the beautiful soprano solo and was compelled to encore at the Mozart Park. On June 14th, 1990, she performed at the casino at Wheeling Park, which was the first public park in Wheeling, West Virginia. The musical collection she sang there was called Spring Is Come. With all of this as well, she was the choir director at her church, the First Presbyterian Church in Wheeling, West Virginia, and she was a member of 3 additional music organizations: the Thursday Music Club as an honorary member, the Women's Club of Wheeling, also known as the Women's Music Club, and the Republican Women's Chorus. Williams also used her talent of singing to voice her support for the suffrage movement. In 1916, she became the president of the Women's Municipal League. She was also part of the pro-suffrage Flying Squadron of Speakers. The job of the Flying Squadron was to travel the states, specifically the state of West Virginia, in the final months of the suffrage campaign to support their voice for the suffrage movement. Though the squadron itself was mostly dominated by men, there were suffragists like Flora who were able to give their actual real life experiences as a woman during the suffrage movement and the challenges and struggles that they had to face. The primary speakers at these different events were attorneys, judges, and political or religious leaders. Most of the time, these gatherings were not in front of huge crowds, and they weren't always fully organized, and they were not always initiated by suffrage organizations, but rather these people just traveled and spoke to advocate for women's rights to basically anybody who would listen. And they would go to a small town and speak, and sometimes powerful politicians were there and listened. Beyond the suffrage movement in the later part of Mrs. Williams' life, she became a strong Republican activist. She has no direct descendants beyond one niece and three nephews, and she traveled extensively with her husband before he died on November 17th, 1928, at the age of 73. And he is buried in Greenwood Cemetery, along with Mrs. Flora Williams, who died at the age of 98 on July 23rd, 1962, where she was in St. Petersburg, Florida, at a Restorium. That is the life of a singing suffragette, Flora Williams. She had a long career in music and singing, and she was able to use those God given talents as a suffragette during the women's suffrage movement. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and you understand the importance of women like Flora Williams, who fought for women's rights. They were part of the suffrage movement in the United States, and they weren't famous for the sacrifices that they made. But hopefully this shed some light on a much bigger picture of what women had to go through, and which set up what women are able to do now in the United States. If you have any other further questions, please feel free to contact me at mor5453@calu.edu. Again, that is mor5453@calu.edu. Thank you.